I've said this a few times before, but it's important for me to really clarify this. I was wrong about Islam, straight up, no sugarcoating it. For years, like so many people in the West, I carried around this image of Islam that was, well, let's just say it wasn't accurate. I thought I knew what it was. I thought I understood the basics. I thought it was this rigid, oppressive system where everyone's angry and violent and women are just completely suppressed. That's the narrative I had in my head. And here's the thing, I didn't pull that out of thin air. That came from years of watching news cycles, listening to certain political pundits, and absorbing little sound bites that kept reinforcing this idea that Islam equals terrorism, Islam equals extremism. If you're like me growing up in the West, you've been marinating in that messaging since it was everywhere. And I never really questioned it deeply. Sure, I had conversations here and there, but did I ever sit down and say, let me actually learn what this is all about? Nope, I didn't. And that was a huge mistake, because here's the truth. Islam, as I've come to learn, is not what I thought it was. In fact, it's almost the opposite of what I thought. And when I started digging into it, man, it blew my mind. So I want to share that with you, not to preach, not to convert anyone, but because this is important. We're living in a time when misunderstanding can literally lead to wars, discrimination, hate crimes, all because of ignorance. And I was part of that ignorance. So let's unpack it. The misconceptions I grew up with. All right, let's start with the big one. Violence. That's the one everyone associates with Islam, right? Terrorism, suicide bombings, holy war. I mean, when you hear Allahu Akbar on the news, what do you think? Be honest. Most people immediately think, oh crap, something bad's about to happen. Why? Because that's how it's been framed for decades. And I bought into that. I thought Islam was this inherently violent religion that promoted killing people who don't believe in it. I had that idea in my head. And I didn't even realize how much it influenced the way I thought about Muslims in general. Sure, I'd say stuff like, not all Muslims are bad. But in the back of my mind, there was this suspicion, yeah, but their religion, it's kind of intense, right? That was me. And if you're honest, maybe that's you too. Then there was the thing about women. Every time you saw coverage of the Middle East, it was women in black clothing from head to toe. You'd hear stories about honor killings, no education for women, all this. And again, I assumed that was Islam. I thought, well, that's just what they believe. I never asked, is this cultural or religious? Is there a difference? Spoiler alert, there's a huge difference. Media shaped my view more than I knew. Let's talk about how much the media screws with us. After 9/11, every news outlet in America went into overdrive. And look, I get it. What happened was horrific. People wanted answers. But what we got was fear on steroids. Every story was about terrorism. Every movie villain suddenly had an Arabic accent. Shows like 24 made every Muslim character some kind of sleeper agent. Dude, when you see that over and over for years, it rewires your brain. And it wasn't just news or entertainment. Even comedy played a role. I mean, think about the jokes that were floating around after 9. They all painted Muslims as these violent extremists. And that kind of humor, even when it's meant to be harmless, it reinforces stereotypes. It makes them normal. And I was part of that. I laughed at those jokes. I probably repeated a few myself. I never thought about the impact. When curiosity kicked in, so what changed? Honestly, it was conversations. That's the beauty of doing this podcast. I meet all kinds of people, and over time I had a few guests who were Muslim or who had studied Islam deeply. And they dropped these little nuggets of knowledge that made me go, wait, what? That's not what I heard. Like, I remember someone telling me that the word Islam literally means peace. And I was like, hold up, the religion I've been told is all about violence actually means peace. How does that make sense? So I started digging. I read a translation of the Quran. Not the whole thing at first. I'm not gonna lie, but I started with sections people recommended. And what I found was honestly shocking, because the Quran wasn't saying what I expected. It wasn't kill everyone who disagrees. It was talking about mercy, justice, compassion, over and over. And yeah, there are verses about fighting, but they're always in context. It's like if someone's attacking you, defend yourself. Show me a religion that doesn't have something similar. Even the Bible has that, but that nuance gets lost when the media cherry picks quotes to make a headline. The first big realization, one of the first things that hit me, was how similar Islam is to other major religions. It's not some alien system. It's part of the Abrahamic family, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. They all believe in one God. They all believe in prophets. In fact, Muslims believe in Jesus. That blew my mind. Did you know that? Because I didn't. I thought Jesus was strictly a Christian thing. Nope. He's in the Quran. Mary too. There's an entire chapter named after her. And Muslims believe Jesus was born of a virgin. Like what? Why aren't we talking about that? Why is the narrative always us versus them, when at the core these religions share? Breaking down the women stereotype. Let's talk about women, because that was a big one for me. I thought Islam treated women horribly, but here's the reality. Islam gave women rights 1400 years ago that women in the West didn't have, and the right to own property, the right to inheritance, the right to choose who to marry. Those were all in Islamic law from the beginning. And when I read that, I was like, wait a minute. So this whole image of women being oppressed, is that really Islam, or is it cultural stuff mixed with politics? And the more I looked, the more I realized it's mostly cultural. Certain countries have traditions that go way beyond what Islam actually says, but those countries get all the media attention, so everyone thinks that's the religion. Jihad, the most misunderstood word. Now let's tackle the big scary word, jihad. Everyone thinks that means holy war. That's what I thought. Turns out the primary meaning of jihad is struggle, internal struggle, like fighting your own ego, your own bad habits. Yes, there's a concept of physical struggle, like defending yourself, but the main thing is about self-improvement. When I learned that, I literally laughed, because I'd spent years thinking jihad was this call to violence against non-Muslims. And really it's about discipline and being a better person. That's wild. The moments that changed everything. There were a couple of conversations that really sealed the deal for me. One was with a guy who said, Joe, have you ever seen a terrorist with a Quran in his hand while doing something horrible? No, because they're not actually practicing Islam. They're doing something completely against the religion. And that clicked. Every religion has extremists. Every ideology can be twisted. But we don't judge all Christians by the KKK, right? So why do we judge 1.8 billion Muslims by the actions of a few lunatics? Another moment was watching Muslims pray. Sounds simple, right? But it hit me hard. Here are people 5 times a day stopping what they're doing to connect with something bigger than themselves. There's a discipline and humility in that. And I thought, man, if more people, regardless of religion, did that, the world would probably be a better place. Why am I sharing this? Because I was wrong, and I don't want to stay wrong. I don't want other people to stay wrong either. Ignorance is a choice and information is out there. You just have to look. And if someone like me, who's been on the biggest podcast in the world, who's had access to experts and thinkers, if I can admit I was wrong, maybe that inspires someone else to question their assumptions. We've talked about my misconceptions, the media influence, and the first big lessons I learned. But we're not done. Part 2, we're going deeper. We're going to talk about what Islam actually teaches about morality, science, and society. We're going to look at why this religion survived for over 1400 years, and why when you strip away the politics and the extremists, it might actually have some wisdom the modern world desperately needs. All right, so in part 1, I talked about my misconceptions, how the media played me like a fiddle. And the first time I cracked open a translation of the Quran, that was eye-opening, man. Like the floor fell out from under my assumptions. But the deeper I went, the crazier it got. And I don't mean crazy in a bad way. I mean crazy in the sense of, how did I not know this? How did nobody tell me this before? So now, let's dig into the part that really changed my perspective, the actual substance of Islam, the moral system, the science, the philosophy, and then the big question everyone asks, can Islam coexist with modern life in the West? And I'll wrap it up with what I've learned personally and what I think we should all take away from this. Islam's moral and ethical framework. Here's the first thing that hit me when I actually started learning what Muslims believe. It's not this alien thing. It's grounded in values that honestly most of us claim to believe in: honesty, justice, charity, humility, self-control. These are universal. But here's the kicker. Islam has this structured way of integrating those values into your everyday life. It's not just be a good person. Here's how to do it. Take zakat, for example. That's mandatory charity. You earn money? Cool. A percentage of it goes to help the less fortunate. Automatically, no debate. No, should I? Shouldn't I? It's built into the system. And I thought, man, what if every rich person in America did that consistently? Would we have the same level of poverty? Probably not. And then there's the whole concept of accountability. Muslims believe that every action, big or small, matters. You're going to be held accountable. And whether you believe in God or not, think about what that does to a society when people genuinely believe they're responsible for everything they do. It creates this sense of mindfulness in everyday life. Compare that to the chaos we've got right now, where it feels like nothing matters and everyone's just chasing dopamine hits on TikTok. It made me think maybe there's something we can learn here. And the spiritual and psychological side, another thing that blew me away is how much Islam focuses on inner peace. Like when I thought of Islam before, I thought of strict rules, people walking around looking serious all the time. But when you actually talk to practicing Muslims, you realize that prayer, those 5 daily prayers, isn't just ritual for ritual's sake. It's meditation with purpose. It's a reset button. 5 times. And I started thinking, man, what would happen if everybody, Muslim, Christian, atheist, whatever, took 5 breaks a day to step away from the chaos, unplug and center themselves? We'd probably have way less anxiety, way less depression. And this is coming from a guy who's done float tanks, psychedelics, you name it. I've explored all these tools for self-awareness, but here's a religion that's had a built-in system for 1400 years. That's insane. And yet, we dismiss it as outdated. Are you kidding? Islam and science, what I didn't expect. Now let's talk about science, because this was a big curveball for me. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, Joe, what does Islam say about science? I'd have said they're probably against it, because that's the stereotype, right? You'll think of extremists blowing up schools and you assume the whole religion is anti-education. But historically, Islam was at the forefront of science. The whole concept of algebra, that's from Muslim scholars, hospitals, optics, astronomy, they were crushing it while Europe was still in the Dark Ages. And then I read about how the Quran 1400 years ago talks about things like the development of the human embryo in stages. Modern science only confirmed that recently. Now, I'm not saying that's proof of divine revelation, that's a whole different debate, but it definitely makes you stop and go, huh, that's interesting. Because how did a guy in the desert with no microscope know that? At the very least, it makes you curious. Islam versus media narrative. Now let's address the elephant in the room. If Islam is so great, why do we see so much chaos in Muslim countries? Good question. And that's what I asked too. The answer is complicated. But here's the short version. Most of what we see, wars, dictatorships, corruption, that's politics, not religion. It's power struggles, colonial history, foreign interference. Religion just gets dragged into it because it's an easy rallying cry. But the problem is when you turn on CNN or Fox, they're not giving you a history lesson. They're giving you a 30-second clip of some lunatic waving a gun and yelling in Arabic. And we take that as the whole picture. That would be like someone watching a video of a Westboro Baptist protest and saying, that's all Christians. It's ridiculous, but we fall for it every time. Islam in modern society. Can it work? Here's the question everyone wants answered. Can Islam coexist with modern life in the West? And my answer is, it already does. There are millions of Muslims in America, in Europe, living normal lives. They're doctors, teachers, they're contributing to society without blowing anything up. The narrative that says Islam and the West are incompatible, that's a political tool. It's fear-mongering. Because when you actually talk to Muslims, real Muslims, not the caricature on the news, you realize they want the same stuff we do. Peace, stability, opportunity. Now does that mean everything's perfect? No. There are cultural clashes, sure. But here's the thing, that's not unique to Islam. That happens with any immigrant group. The Irish, the Italians, they all went through that when they came to America. But we figured it out. We can figure this out too. If we stop demonizing people. Lessons I learned. So what's the big takeaway here? For me, it's humility. I thought I knew. I thought I had Islam figured out based on sound bites and headlines. And I was dead wrong. And if I was wrong about this, what else am I wrong about? That's the question I keep asking myself now. It's made me more curious, more open, because the second you think you know everything, you stop learning. And that's dangerous. Another lesson, don't outsource your thinking. Don't let the media tell you what to believe. Go to the source. Talk to people. Read for yourself, because when you do, you might find that the story you've been sold is completely upside down. A message to my audience. If you've been listening to this and thinking Joe's going soft, or Joe's converting, Relax. That's not what this is. I'm not here to tell you what to believe. I'm here to tell you what I learned and to encourage you to do your own homework. Because whether you agree with Islam or not, understanding it matters. Ignorance breeds fear. Fear breeds hate. And we've got enough of that in the world already. So talk to your Muslim neighbor. Ask questions. Be curious. Because at the end of the day, most of us want the same thing. A good life, peace, and maybe a little meaning to this crazy ride we're all on. Closing thoughts. So yeah, I was wrong about Islam, and admitting that publicly. It's not easy, but it's necessary. Because growth doesn't happen in your comfort zone. It happens when you challenge yourself. When you look at something you thought you understood and say, maybe I don't. That's where the good stuff is. That's where the learning. And if this conversation inspires even one person to question their assumptions, to look deeper, then it's worth it. Because the truth is always more interesting than the lies we've been told.